We're here to educate, inspire, and connect entrepreneurs. And so, we had the networking beforehand, and then we're going to have Monica in here, and she's going to talk about what it's like to be a venture capitalist. Those are people who, invest in early stage companies to help those companies grow. Hold on, not yet, Monica, not yet. Calm down over there. So Monica's been in the Detroit area. She's worked for huge companies, Fortune 10 companies, but she really inspired me. And when I heard her story, she really got excited about startups. Way back in the day, way before me. And she was like, I want to build these things in Detroit. And so she might see something cool that's happening in another community, like a startup week, and then instead of saying, hey, why don't we have this here in Detroit, she goes and she builds it in Detroit. And so that really inspired me here in Lansing to do that. And I think that we'll get into it, but I have a feeling she had a little bit of a hand in Backstage ending up here in Detroit. And I just thought it was so cool that she works there now, and that she's able to bring such a great organization. And look at what Techstars Mobility has done in Detroit. And I'm really excited to see what Backstage is going to do in Detroit. So if everybody can get up and give a standing ovation, please help them out. Welcome to the stage, Monica Weeks. We'll do a quick mic check. Say hi to everybody.
Can you hear me?
Yep. I can hear you too. How'd that welcome feel here in Lansing?
Very much great.
Yeah, you can move here instead of Detroit?
Possibly no.
We were talking a little bit before we got started over here about how you got to where you are. But let's go back even earlier.
Okay.
When you were a little child, what do you remember about your childhood that helped you get to where you are now, and be who you are now?
I was a military brat. We lived everywhere. We lived in a lot of different communities. I think that shaped a lot of how I see the world, because we weren't, in one space for years with the same norms. Every time we went to a new place, we had to meet people, solve different types of problems, make new friends, all that kind of stuff. And that became part and parcel of everything. I was born in Michigan, but spent several years in California, San Jose, Santa Monica, a little bit in California, a little bit in Chicago, several years in Ann Arbor, the other city, and then overseas. But through all those different places, definitely it was all about consistently getting the chance to reinvent myself, but also getting the chance to figure out how to make friends, how to solve problems, how to just do all that stuff from a lot of different levels as I kept getting older and older.
When you were 5 or 10 years old, what was the first career, or what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
I was going to be a doctor. I literally was going to be a doctor. I literally thought that everyone's like, you're good in math and science, you need to go become a doctor. Dispelled that really quick when I was in this kind of gifted summer program and they gave us a human cadaver. And I was like, I'm not going to be a doctor.
How old were you?
When that was when I was in high school. But all that time up until then, I just knew I was going to be a doctor. The funny thing is I was thinking the other day was some of my earliest memories are that we had, I was 11. We had neighborhood-wide summer camps that we created for the kids when I was 11 years old. And so we convinced all the parents to send their kids to us for a fee. And we would entertain them for the summer and we'd do all these activities. And then as I became a teenager, we kind of stole the idea for anybody who remembers, it's a really old book series, the Babysitters Club. We made a citywide Babysitters Club in the city of Southfield. We made thousands of dollars. We had a network of about half a dozen girls. And we were out there. We took CPR classes, we did the whole nine to make our product better than everybody else's. But we had a citywide club, and we were making really good money when I was in middle school and high school.
Oh my gosh! I think back then my allowance was probably $2 or $4 or something.
we were making really good money. We were going on trips. We were shopping when we wanted to. We didn't have to ask our parents for anything. I kind of caught the bug back then because I was like, I get to do whatever I want while the rest of my friends, they have to go beg their parents for $10. And we didn't have that issue. We went to Cedar Point. We did all the things that you're supposed to do, but we didn't have to ask. And our parents were like, they're good girls, let them go. So little did they know.
What did your parents think? How'd that make you feel to be empowered like that?
At the time, my mother really, I am not that type of parent. but my mother was. She was one of those, she was more of a coach you rather than do for you. I ended up being the opposite, where I try to solve all these problems I adopted my nieces, I try to solve all these problems for her. My mom was very much, that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it, just make sure you're in bed, home on time and your chores are done. But always very supportive. They had to sign all the permission slips for us and all that kind of stuff we took CPR training and things like that to kind of make it so that if anybody's kid almost died, we'd be in a good spot. But she was always supportive of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was definitely, she was always in our corner. My parents are not entrepreneurs themselves, they're lifelong corporate folks, but they were never ones to put a lot of stock into degrees and titles. That never was something that drove them, and I inherited that innately.
And so, did you have any other businesses as a kid?
As a kid, no. People used to pay me to do their homework. That was a little side thing that I had going. I had that for a while too.
Hold on, this is recorded.
Darn, they're gonna strip my elementary school thing. No, but I literally had I would do people's homework, and I remember that. I was making really good money from that actually too. At the time, I didn't think of those things as being an entrepreneur. It was just cool stuff I could do. I was a really smart kid. In elementary school, I tested out of most of the stuff. My mom wouldn't put me up because she thought that would be bad for me socially. So they didn't have anything to do with me. So they let me be an assistant, and I would just walk around trying to find stuff to do. And I remember that in 5th grade, I remember that in 6th grade, that I had a lot of excess time to kind of imagine, if you will. But I never thought of it as being an entrepreneur. I thought of it as just, I get to do school announcements, I get to go help the kindergartners, I get to go do these things. Why don't we, try something else, so.
What happened to that babysitter club? You IPO'd and you sold it?
No, unfortunately. It just kind of fizzled as everybody got older. Everybody started having boyfriends. Then they didn't want to babysit on their Friday nights and Saturday nights anymore. It kind of fizzled. And then also too, as we got further along in high school, we definitely people started. I ran track, and I was a cheerleader and all that kind of stuff. So we started doing other things. It was never a challenge to make money, so for us it wasn't like a big deal to just try something else.
I like that trying something else. And so then, what got you excited about entrepreneurship and startup culture?
So, even though most folks don't know, I am not 25. I have been working for pushing 20 years, corporate-wise. My parents, again, really weren't big on signing loans and things like that for college. They were basically like, if that's what you want to do, that's you mortgaging your future, because college costs a lot. I went to the University of Michigan, but I couldn't pay for it. I had to work my way through college, and when I did that, one of the things that was consistent is that I had to be super creative on coming up with ways on how to do this. Go to school full-time, work full-time, all that kind of stuff. And I've been working full-time since I was 19. So that's how I got to pushing 20 years of corporate experience. But as a young person, being in corporate, so I learned a lot of lessons that were awesome. I ran global groups and things like that for Ford and GM and stuff. And I'm running all these teams, I'm hiring people, I'm managing multi-million-dollar budgets and all this kind of stuff. But it was boring. It was so boring. It was very much, and then for somebody who's used to having such autonomy and who's used to people letting them do whatever they want. When you're in a corporate structure, especially Fortune 10, it's all rules. It's all rules, it's all hierarchy, it's all politics. I was at GM when GM went into bankruptcy. I've been laid off, I've been fired, I've been all sorts of things. I've challenged people, I've been challenged, I've had my work stolen. It was a lot of those ups and downs because I rose very high very quickly. And so I had a lot of people doubt me and doubt that I had that asked to me in a public forum once. I was there I was global lead for Ford at the time, I think it was. I was global lead for Ford. We used to do their websites and their mobile apps. And in the midst of a public thing, someone was like, "You're the global lead?" I'm like, "Yes, that would be what they pay me for." I don't know. But it was always those challenges. And the other part was a lot of, the thing that I really liked was innovation. I loved anything that was Ford is going to do a new app that allows you to create your own Mustang. I want to do that. I want to find the vendors who are going to do it. I want to figure out the technology. I want to do all this kind of stuff. I was always volunteering for any of those projects. But when we're in the midst of some of those, we've got people coming out of the woodwork, all these people who want to partner with GM, Ford, and Chrysler. And it's just the very beginning of when they first start thinking of like real autonomous car mobility stuff, and it's really cool. But it's taking them 18 months plus to implement something from the time they get an idea to actually making it a product, and that drags you down. It drags you down a lot, especially when you see other people out in the world kind of doing their, coming up with their products, being able to test it, take it to market, all this kind of stuff. They were old school. They had been doing stuff like that for years, both formally on GM Ford Chrysler side and on agency side, which I worked both sides at different times. They were just slower at the time. Now they're leaps and bounds and running and doing all sorts of stuff in mobility and autonomy, and it's really cool. But at the time, it was a different time back then when I was working. So for me, it was really just trying to understand how I can be happy. And if I'm going to put in 80-hour work weeks, I want to do 80-hour work weeks on my own thing, kind of. So it kind of I think that was the motivation. And I think for me, I've always been really good at corporate partnerships. And I think I found that my niche, and I had a skill set for understanding how to work within that infrastructure since I had done it for so long. And that made me a better partner for them from the outside than it was working with them on the inside. And so for me, that was a sweet spot of really trying to understand how we can do some really cool stuff, and how me, who spends a lot of time developing ecosystems, cultivating and finding startups and people who would be good partners, and then pulling those into like really large corporate infrastructures. That made way more sense than me walking through the door every morning at 8 a.m. and filling out a whole bunch of paperwork and sitting in 13 meetings and stuff like that. So
I feel like, are there people out in the audience who want to connect with big companies?
Yes.
To help their company?
You might want to. A lot of them are not fast, and they are looking. It's easier for them to invest in, partner in, or somehow engage in startups and people who are doing innovation than it is for them to try to do it from the ground up. Now, a lot more of the companies, especially GM and Ford, are they have a lot more innovation centers and innovation hubs and things like that. But back in the day, when some of that stuff was really only focused on manufacturing and really only focused on the newest what do you call this? Car parts. But yeah, now they have a whole innovation hubs and outposts and stuff in Silicon Valley. They have a whole bunch of stuff that they've brought here to Detroit and into the big three. So it's completely different, but they're looking for people who are going to have some of those next big things that they can partner with or have a chance to support, because that's key for them.
And when I've had my startups, either I've had right at the beginning when there's no customers, no revenue, no anything, I'm thinking like, oh, I might want to sell to GM. Or maybe I have like an inkling of a product, and I'm like, oh, this is working for small businesses, and then think about scaling that up. And when I look at a company that's got thousands or maybe tens of thousands of employees, it can look like a big castle wall, that's like not welcome here. What do you say to audience members? How do they get inside that castle?
Find people who know how the castle's built. That's pretty key. I think the other thing is with anything, it's one of those things, like I first heard it at Y Combinator. I went to Female Founders Conference years ago, and I thought it was the most amazing thing, got exposed to such amazing insight and such amazing ability for how people are developing companies and getting big investments. And they said the number one thing they started the conference off with was they were like, build something people want. And that's the same thing with corporate. You have to be able to figure out what makes sense for them from a product line, from a feature like that they might want, that they can easily adapt or pull in, or that could enhance something that they have going. So part of that is like, it's the same as anything else. It's like if you're researching a target for an app or something like that, and you're trying to figure out how do people use it, how do people buy it, what are their price points, all those kind of things. The same thing happens with corporate. You need to figure out I have Google Alerts, I have like 30 Google Alerts on different topics and different combinations of topics for things that I'm interested in. I want to know every time you move. So that when I'm having a conversation with you and I meet you out in the street randomly, I know what your latest best thing that made it. I know how your website changed, it got updated because XYZ. I know that intel, and that makes me be better able to either come up with a partnership, give you valuable connections and valuable leads instead of just a whole bunch of quantity. I'm giving you quality because I know what's the newest next thing that's an investment point, or that's a recent acquisition and things like that.
One piece you talked about was talking to people who built the castle. How do I, if I'm a student or I'm a young entrepreneur, how do I find those people?
It depends. I tell people that one of the tools that is super underutilized is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is super underutilized. A lot of people think of it as archaic and like, oh, it's not like. I get so much traction and so many connections from it's information. You're looking at people, you can see their past. You can do searches on LinkedIn and figure out where they used to work. You can figure out where they do work, what they're currently working on. People are doing thought piece articles, all that kind of stuff. It's giving you all the information at your fingertips. 9 times out of 10, if you reach out to folks who have gone to your album, who are alumni of your school, or who come from, and it'll show you where they went to high school sometimes. It'll show you what city they live in. It'll show you what college they went to. It'll show you where they used to work. Use that as a connection point. Be like, hey, I see you're also a former MSU alumni, and you now work at Ford's Innovation Hub or Google's X Lab or whatever it may be. I would love if you could, I know, but here's the thing. You want to be very specific and very precise on how you connect with them and saying, I know that Google X Lab is having this really cool thing at the tech center or something like that. Do you know how, ask them a generic question. Do you know if that's open to students? Do you know if that's open to people, do you know if that's open to the public? Just have a word that's a real tangible thing that they can actually interact with you on. That's a different conversation than the thousands of people who send me random stuff all the time where they're like, hey, I want to work with you. And I'm like, who are you? Why, or the thousand people who just send connection requests with no background. I don't have time to go and figure out why I should help you or how I can help you. I don't have time to do that. No one else will either. But if you give them, this is our connection point. Most alumni will help alumni from their school. Most people will help people who grew up or came from their same neighborhoods or their same school, or same high schools, alma maters, all that kind of stuff. And that's your connection point. Most people want to see people who came from the places that they came from do well. And if you don't have any of those connection points, then connect with them on things that you see them doing. See that they wrote an article on cryptocurrency, or see they wrote an article on artificial intelligence, and that they were quoted in something. And talk to them like, hey, I saw you were quoted in XYZ. I'd really love to learn more about that. That's how you start the relationship to kind of have a meaningful conversation where they're paying attention and they know why to connect with you versus just it being cold. A cold one, I was looking at it today earlier. I think of some stupid number of cold LinkedIn requests. If I'm not scanning and I don't see your name, I'm not scanning and you're not, and it doesn't start off, it's the generic, I want to put you in my business network or whatever from LinkedIn. I don't have time to figure out why that's a good reason. But if it starts out, hey Monica, I'm a University of Michigan alum, I'm like, oh, what are they doing? Just for you get that added, you get that added 2 seconds of consideration. And that's an easy way from a cold piece. The other thing is LinkedIn and other tools like it, there are other ones, will tell you how you're connected with folks. So your dream job might be at Company X and you might not know anybody at Company X, but it'll tell you that you have 2 or 3 connections that know someone who works there. So that can help you, hey, this is what I need. I really would love if you could introduce me at XYZ. It says you're connected, can you help me? That very specific ask is 9 times out of 10 more easily to respond to than generic, open, hey, I want to be in your network. That's great. So what does that mean? And there's limits too. So people, you can't just have limitless connections on all these things. They have limits. So once you hit a certain amount, you're going through and purging folks. We've never talked, we've never exchanged a note, we've never exchanged an article, we've never done anything. I need space. That's the way that it works. That's just the way that it works.
Hopefully you never delete me. So it sounds like the advice is pretty much start slow with something that's easy, not a big, long thing that people don't have time to read, and then build from there with a specific, develop that relationship.
Let me double down on that because I've seen people that I've seen come talk and they said that they're embarrassed when they look back at some of the notes that they sent out. I'm embarrassed at some of the notes that I've sent out because I look back and I'm like, why did I really think I was going to read that? Now, every once in a while it'll work, but for the most part, be very succinct and quick. And if you can do that and this is the point, this is why we're connected, this is what I'm trying to get, can you help? That's going to get a better response than a long, drawn out, I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this. If they're interested, they're going to ask you. If they think they can help, they'll be like, send me your resume, and I'll do an intro, or whatever it may be. But you've got to package the information in a way so that it's easy for people to respond.
And so then, before we got into the Castle Wall, broke to the Castle Wall subject, you were talking about that you were in the castle wall and you felt constrained there with all the rules and things like that, and that you felt like you could be more effective outside and have more autonomy, and so you decided to go into the startup world.
How did I first start? I don't remember how I first started. I know that I went to Michigan. I was in the college engineering. I loved my program that I went through. It opened a lot of doors for me, but I had always worked full time. And I knew that I didn't want to be an engineer. I knew that because I was in, I knew that clicked to my head when I was working for GM in Shanghai. And I remember thinking, this is not for me. And I remember thinking, these people are happy, like, these people are as happy as hell, and I don't know why. I have no clue why they're happy, but they were happy. They were super happy to be there because that was the pinnacle of their career, for them to be placed in Shanghai, to be in these cubicles, and to be going over, like, project plans for different parts. We were there to introduce the Escalade to the Shanghai market, which was ill-formed because if anybody's ever been over there, the streets are like this small. But anyway, I knew then that I did not want to be an engineer. And then I'm like, okay, now what do I do? Because I'm like almost at the end of this whole education thing. How it first started was, this was before the bankruptcy in 2008, but they were having some financial difficulties, and a job that was offered to me for when I came back from overseas disappeared. And my boss liked me, and my boss put a good word in for me with Delphi. So Delphi is third-party supplier that does all this cool stuff in tech. And it was for their corporate engineering team. And as part of their corporate engineering team, they needed people. I've always been promoted really fast because I like to talk. I don't know if you guys picked that up. I like to talk, and I don't mind. I've led a lot of teams, and that doesn't bother me, but a lot of my bosses, it did. A lot of my bosses, they're engineers, they're cerebral, they like to be in the corner, and they were like, send her, she likes to do that stuff. And so I got a lot of opportunities like that very early on, and I went to Delphi, and I was doing corporate engineering, and I got to that was my first foray with the startup world, because our job is to find cool companies that were doing cool stuff and figure out how they can fit into the supply chain of everything that was going on from a corporate perspective. So I was sitting across these big tables, and I'm like, they look like they're having fun. They look like when they go back to their office, they like their jobs and they like the people that they work with. And we're gonna come back here, and I'm gonna be the only one talking again while everybody else is quiet. And like, I just knew that I wanted to be on that side of the table. So Delphi actually went into bankruptcy as well. And at that time, I made the jump. I found an opportunity to go work for an agency that was doing websites and mobile apps for big corporate brands. And I took the jump, and everybody thought I was crazy. They were like, what is wrong with you? Like, they're like, you make 6 figures plus, like, you're gonna go work with kids, you're gonna you're gonna go work on stuff that's risky and you don't really know. But it was, for me, it was just as risky. This is what I'll tell people too. It was just as risky having the corporate job. Because mind you, as I'm telling the story, you hear me saying, they went out of business, I got laid off, I got let go, I had all these different politics things happen. There's all these challenges. And just because you do a good job and you work 80 hours a week and you have stellar reviews does not make your job safe. Because I had all those and my job was still not safe. So when everybody was like, this is so risky, and I'm like, how is this any better? Like, it really wasn't that much better. So for me, it was just made sense, and there were some really cool opportunities, and so I jumped. But initially, a lot of the stuff that we started was all volunteer, and I was doing it while I was working in corporate, and it was just about building the ecosystem and building stuff that I remember growing up in Silicon Valley, growing up in California, and bringing it to Detroit, and just figuring out if it would fit, could it fit, and how could we make it thrive, and it did. So
I want to pause there for a minute. You talked about people calling you crazy, and I think there's a lot of that. When people get a job at Google or Apple, they walk around with their chest held high, and I think a lot of people, when they're talking about, I'm doing this startup thing, they don't want to talk about it.
Agreed.
How did you get through that? How did you get over that?
I'll be very honest with you. Like I said in the beginning, I was still working in corporate when I first started doing startup stuff. I had a lot of energy, and I was doing them both at the same time, and I was still making really good money, and I really just didn't care. I was just like, I'm making more money than all of you guys, so I don't know what you're wrong with. Over time, as I switched more from full corporate to full startup, then there was more risk, because then it was like, man, because there's some downsides to this. This is not for the faint of heart, people. And I say that all the time, but there was some real low points where we're like, Okay, so do I pay for the deposit on our big space that we need, or do I pay the mortgage? Like, which of these is gonna happen this month? Because they both can't come anymore. We're still waiting for check X or check Y or whatever it may be. There really wasn't a lot that I could do to combat it. It just was really just knowing that I wasn't happy over there and I was happy over here, and just being willing to see it through. So it really is about fit for me, and it was really about having done 15, pushing 20 years of corporate and not having been happy, and having them, if I'm gonna kill myself, if I'm gonna just be honest, like if I'm gonna be in the hospital and I'm gonna have exhaustion and all these other things going on, I might as well do it for something that I own a piece of. Like if I'm gonna do that, I might as well do it for something where my nieces that I've adopted might have a chance to, be good after I'm gone. Like instead of this side where they'll lay you off tomorrow and they'll be like, we think you're great, but you have such a good skill set, we thought you could find a job better than he could, so we're gonna let you go today, and like what's the difference in that space? So for me, there really wasn't a struggle. It was more taking advantage of opportunities and just really being okay with going for what I wanted.
Okay, then before I sidetracked you, you were about to talk about starting building ecosystem in Detroit.
Yes.
What was the pie in the sky vision? You saw Detroit, I don't know, it was 2010 or 11 or something like that, and you saw a different Detroit than what everybody else saw when there's the articles in Yahoo about 1,000 houses under $1,000.
Yeah, we did it wrong when we first started. Our earliest days were actually like 08-ish, 07, 08-ish was some of our earlier days. And we did it wrong, because what we try to do is we try to replicate what was happening in Silicon Valley. We try to bring everything that was in Silicon Valley to Detroit. And some of it worked, but some of it didn't. And that's because we weren't Silicon Valley. We didn't have the same levers to push and pull as they did. So out the gate, we're like, we're going to do all this venture cap, but there's not that many venture capitalists. There's not that much money. So like, there's not deal flow to put people through to. So that part's failing. Oh, we're going to do pitch competitions. People don't know what pitch competitions are. Like, so that part's not going. So there's all these ups and downs where we had to like pause, figure out what was going to work for us, and then start at the beginning on a lot of stuff like pitch competitions 101, venture capital 101, term sheets 101. Like, how do we start the community the community understanding some of this terminology, some of the ways that this stuff has worked, and how do we start there? And that became what Detroit's ecosystem is. I always tell people too, there are so many times in the setup and the building of the Detroit infrastructure that people were really anti, because if you don't know, I don't know what ages everybody are, or if you don't know, in Detroit historically, you could graduate from high school, and not Detroit, just Michigan as a whole, but you could graduate from high school, get a job on the line, making $30, $40 an hour. With overtime, you're getting $50+ an hour. And if you work for 25 years, you can retire, get your pension, and then have a whole separate career with no college education. So that's and that's the culture, and everybody's used to that, and it's a legacy. Your granddad did it, your dad did it, your brother's doing it. So why again would I take this risk to make no money? And why again would I take this risk to do innovation and to like quote unquote challenge, these big, like 7 out of the top 20 companies and Fortune 10 companies are here in the Metro Detroit area. We have all these numbers of these companies in here. Why would I take this perceived risk against these bigger companies when I have a guaranteed, quote unquote, guaranteed check? I'm going to get a pension for the rest of my life, and everybody I know has done it this way. That was hard for people, but I always tell people, I think the pivot point was in 2008. In 2008, we had been doing it for a couple of years, so I don't know really what year we started, because in 2008 was actually the pivot point. But in 2008, when GM and Chrysler went into bankruptcy, everybody was like, wait a minute, this isn't forever? This isn't guaranteed? There's no more pensions? Wait, these companies aren't solvent? Like, these companies can fail? Like, GM can fail, the largest bankruptcy in the history of the United States. Not just in Michigan, not just in Detroit, in the history of the United States, it was the largest bankruptcy. People were losing their minds. But it allowed opportunity, because it broke it open. It broke open the shell of like how our culture had been. And that allowed us to like make people take risks on us. That allowed people to start saying, okay, I'll give you kids $50K to see if this will work. I'll give you $20K to see if this will work. Okay, I'll sponsor this. I'll give you space to hold your competitions. Okay, I'll give you co-working space. I'll put some engineers who will do some coding for you. I'll do these things because clearly this thing that we thought was unbreakable and immovable clearly isn't. And I think I always tell people 2008 was the pivot point. That's when the tide started changing for Detroit as an ecosystem, for the city as an ecosystem, and for all of us who were in this space doing work. Because before that, they really were looking at us like we were nuts.
So I'm going to do a lot of history, because I think you built a lot of really cool things in Detroit. You talked about that pivot point, and then all the organizations that you helped with, Detroit Startup Week and Bamboo, and you probably listen better than I can, Digerati Girls. But now you're at Backstage.
Yes.
You're at Backstage Capital, which probably wouldn't have been there without all of that work that you've done over the past 9 years or so.
That was part of how we called attention to it. So I consider myself what is called an ecosystem builder. So I create connections and partnerships, and I produce large-scale initiatives and events, mostly focused on getting people funding and or resources that will help them get apps, will help them get coding, all that kind of stuff. Mostly tech, but we work with non-tech too. We work with brick and mortar and people just who have business ideas.
Anyone want money in the audience?
Yeah. Anybody? It's a little bit of what we spend a lot of
Melissa's the only one. She's the only one who put her hand up.
Okay. Our biggest thing is actually called 14 Alternatives to Venture Capital. It sells out every year because that's not the only way. I always say that up front. But when Backstage first happened, we've been doing Venture Catalysts, which is a 501c3. Venture Catalysts houses the infrastructure that we use to do Startup Boost, which is a global pre-accelerator, Startup Week. We've been mentors and helped with Techstars stuff. We run Techstars startup programs, Startup Digest, which is weekly, Women 2.0, all these different initiatives that were at different spaces in the history of the city that were meant to bring people together, teach them about the ecosystem, teach them about funding opportunities, teach them how to build a business, and teach people, and then bring the experts to the table. Bring Brad Feld and all these other guys here to Detroit so that they can see what we're doing and want to invest and bring their friends with them, hopefully. But Backstage happened in about September of last year. That's actually one of the reasons why I noticed it, because my group that I founded is called Venture Catalysts. Fast Company magazine, anybody read Fast Company? Okay. Fast Company magazine put our founder and CEO on the cover of Fast Company with the subtitle Venture Catalyst. And everybody was like, Monica, isn't that? I was like, that's not my company. I was like, but that's how people first pointed it out to me. And I saw this, so I started reading more about Arlen and what she was doing, and I was like, this is cool. And so then at TechCrunch Disrupt, which is where all the big tech announcements are made every year, at TechCrunch Disrupt, she had the main stage, and they announced they were going to do this global accelerator. They said they're going to be in 4 cities, and the 4 cities are Philadelphia, Los Angeles, London, and this 4th city that was unknown, and they were going to have a vote for it. And they were like, well, we're going to vote and see who wants it the most. I don't think I heard anything after that. I was like, okay, you need me to get people to vote? That's what I do. So I ran and started just tapping everybody, sending lists out, sending the link to everybody. My whole goal at the beginning was really just to focus on, hey, how do we bring this here? Because that's what I do. I bring really large-scale events here that have never been here, really large-scale initiatives, really large-scale funding prizes, things like that. And I was like, this is going to be another one. Like, I'm going to get Backstage here. I told everybody else, I'm going to get Backstage here. And it turned out that we had the most votes. Detroit had the most votes of all the cities. And then they told me later that we had the most support from people who didn't even know that Detroit was going to be the 4th city and had written in and said, this is where we want it to be, come support the, that kind of thing. And so we won the votes, and they came to me, and I thought I was going to help them place people, but they came to me and they were like, well, we were wondering if you're interested in being the managing director. And I was just like, sure, why not? Sounds fun. And because it aligns with my goals and things that I've always wanted to do, and was exciting to be a part of something this huge with this focus. We're investing $100,000 per company, early stage companies, some a little bit later stage, but early stage companies. And it's been a whirlwind ever since, and we're launching in March.
Very cool. How many are going to be in that first class?
There are 7 companies going to be in the first class.
7?
Yes, 7.
How many applicants did you get?
We had over 1,900 applicants for 24 spots in the 4 cities. And it was, because we expected that we would get about 800, maybe 1,000. We got 1,900 applicants. And so we had to I interviewed people for like 3 weeks straight in like 10 and 15 minute tracks from 8 a.m. to like 8 p.m. because that's how many people had made it through the round. So it was amazing.
So we went from 1,900 down to 24
Correct.
4 cities.
Yes.
What is your advice to people in the audience who want to stand out when they're, when you need to be 24 of 1,900?
Make something people want and prove it. That was the number one thing that differentiated between people who made it to the final round versus people who got stopped at the other rounds. And not to say that we said that in the thing, not to say that we don't think that we've made some misses, some people that we think could still be great, but when we were comparing them and trying to figure out who was going to make it, it was really people who had come up with something that was a product, an innovation, or a solution that people wanted, and they had some way to prove it. And there were a few people who were early and hadn't really been in the market yet, but we saw them as newer innovations. Like there was some new stuff that they were doing that hadn't been proven yet, so we were able to take a risk on. But for the ones where there were innovations in AI and media and tech and drones and stuff like that, the ones that made it were the ones that were able to prove some way, shape, or form that what they had was a different take on all the other stuff that was in the market, and that's why they would be a good investment. And then also, to being an accelerator, you want people that you think you can help. So people that I know that I have people in my ecosystem or in our global ecosystem, because we're 4 cities, that we think we can bring them some expert level detail that will help them really understand, get to the next level, help them scale, whether that's more acceleration in some sort of growth stage accelerator, whether that's large scale revenue or whether that's investment and going past seed round and getting to like full Series A and things like that.
And why do you pick the people who have proven that they've built something? Why not invest in the people that are at the idea stage and probably need the money more than the people that already maybe have a product, or how they've gotten there without the money?
I would say this. Everything has a place, and I think $100,000 investment for something that's at a very, very beginning of eyes, and we do have a few that were below proof positive, but for the vast majority, $100,000 is not what you need to test it. And you really want to see somebody who's scrappy and who can figure it out. So we had, not in this program, but like it was part of our thesis for like selecting this program, we had this one kid who had a really cool app. And I wish I knew the name because I'd like to give him a shout out, but he didn't have the app built at all, but he had the functionality in Excel spreadsheets, and he had some front end stuff in Excel, and he showed us, like, if you put this here and you put this here, it works. And we were like, oh shit. Oh, sorry. we were like, oh, this is a good thing. And so it was like he was scrappy, and so he didn't have the money, he didn't have the tech know-how, but he was able to prove that he had something, and then he had his friends test it. So he shared the multi-layered spreadsheet with his friends, and they did whole beta tests on this whole thing on Excel. Being scrappy, that's the people that we want to invest in, because now they figured out how to make money even though they didn't have anything to start with. And I think at $100,000 investment in exchange for equity, that's for a company that's at a particular stage. And so it isn't that we don't support, because we still are supporting. We have backstage communities and stuff like that for people who made it to the different levels. So it's not that we're not supporting them and figuring out resources for them, but it was just like they weren't at the fit that we were specifically looking for this particular cohort. But we're still looking at how can we connect with them. We want to be in there. We want to hopefully get them. Maybe we weren't the right choice now, but maybe we'll be the right choice later on as a selection for them for their cap table in general, or for a later accelerator cohort, or any of those things.
And what would you say to people in the audience who are looking for investment? Where should they be at with their idea, with their product? How do they have that proof? Is it their mom's using it? Is that okay?
It is to an extent, but then I would say this. My background is hardcore analytics, and my background is hardcore like product and product market fit and things like that. And most of the folks that I know who are in the space are the same. So we're going to poke holes. We're going to ask you, who are these people? How did you find them? How did you connect with them? Is it just a fluke that they're using your thing? Or were they a target? Did you have an idea of who you needed to test this? And then you kept testing that same group and then sub-testing that same group. And then you figured out how to make it work for that same group because it was intentional and part of your plan. Those are the people that we're gonna double down on trying to figure out how we can help, and how we think that they're good in a good spot for an investment.
Yeah, we're gonna open up for audience questions. I'm gonna do one more question, and we're gonna open up for audience questions. Oh man, just flew right over my head. what kind of return are you looking for? So you put in $100,000 for 5%.
Correct.
So it's a $2 million valuation on the company. What are you looking for? Like, what is that? So if nobody's ever looked at a cap table or anything, what does that mean? After you guys make the investment, things go rosy 7-10 years later, what happens?
I think it's a lot of different things because not all folks, now I should preference and say most of the activities I've ever done have been general market. This particular one with Backstage happens to be D&I focused. And so by design, they were looking for people what we call underestimated founders. And so I think part of it is really looking at those underestimated founders and giving them both the confidence and the platform within to attract other investment. So if we're doing that, then we're looking to figure out how can we become either a stronger part of a future valuation, or we're looking at how can we, because not all of them want, like I'll be very honest, not all of them want to stay in the venture space and keep raising rounds. That's not what everybody wants to do. So I think the path is going to be different for every company. And so for us, there's not one specific thing that we're saying like, we want this person to get here. It's more about how can we be a part of the story and get enough of a return on that 5% that we can continue to like increase opportunities for other folks. A huge part of what we do is bringing other investors and other opportunities to the table so that we're able to help them develop businesses and help them. And that may be, like I said, it could be revenue, it could be investment, and it could be further acceleration, but it just really depends on each company's path. And I think the good folks in the VC space are smart about that, and I think the crappy folks in the VC space are like straight line, only looking for one type of, this whole thing is that there's no one size fits all formula that I think works universally, and I think that's evidenced here.
Thank you. Okay, who's got audience questions?
Regarding the startup scene in Detroit, how important do you think it is for us to kind of be different from New York and Chicago in the Bay Area, and to really find our niche, and how do we do that?
Our niche as a city? I don't think we have to be different from them. I think we just need to figure out places where we are different from them and double down on those. We need to, it's with any investment in any company, you want to know what the secret sauce is, you want to know what the niche is, and you want to hone it, and you want it to be intentional. You want to be able to self-aware enough of who you are so that you know exactly what type of investors, resources, and opportunities to bring to the ecosystem. And you do that through a lot of different things. So I think it's not that we want to differentiate ourselves for the purposes of being able to connect with the right investments and the right other folks, more so than just to differentiate ourselves, if that makes sense. Yes?
So you entered the VC space in what, 08? Is that correct?
Yeah, and that was more angel stuff, yeah.
At that time in Detroit, how many other firms were in the space? Zero?
I would say there's always been, and so this is the misnomer, there's always been venture activity in Detroit. I think it became visible about 2011-ish when DVP, Detroit Venture Partners, came on the scene, at least at the early stage. There's always been growth stage and later stage folks in Detroit doing it. But early stage folks, there wasn't a lot of activity. It was actually in Birmingham and Ann Arbor and other places.
Are you seeing more firms now?
Oh yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry I don't know specific numbers, but I do know that the setup, it was more about visibility than anything else. And as most people are aware, Detroit's model has always been the surrounding suburbs have had all the business and all the capital, and then the city had kind of died for a while, and that trend reversed at about that time period and has been reversing ever since. Yes?
So back in December, you retweeted this tweet from, and it says that out of 85 billion in VC funding last year, only 2.2% went to female founders. Mm-hmm. And every year, women of color gets less than 1% of total funding. And you hashtag this is the mission, made till you see. Mm-hmm. Is it because your goal is to invest in female founders? Or is it what you want to see in Detroit down the road?
I think in particular, because if it's in December timeframe, was hardcore into building for Backstage. And so Backstage's focus is underestimated founders. So we are really focused on founders of color, female founders, and LGBT folks. So we are really looking for how have those folks been traditionally left out of a lot of conversations, how have those folks traditionally been not recruited and not in conversations, myself included, and how can we remedy that? In particular, for those who don't know, Detroit as a city is the largest majority minority city in the country. It's a huge part of our ecosystem and demographic. It's just facts. It just is what it is. So it's one of those things of like, so we have this large population of underrepresented folks, but we have a very, very small population of underrepresented folks getting funding. So like I say, most of my activities are general market. So obviously TechCrunch and Startup Week and all those things, that's where I spend the bulk of my time. This particular initiative happens to be a D&I initiative and happens to focus on underrepresented folks.
Octavius?
Yeah, thanks. So Backstage has got a high income.
Hi, how are you?
So there's this criticism that, going with what she was just asking now, extending it further, is this criticism that says a lot of VC firms now will come and prioritize investment in the minorities, LGBTIs and so forth, but continue to use traditional VC approaches. So quite frankly, that still doesn't take away, anything. They just still do what your traditional VC firms still do. So I wonder if Backstage has got its unique way in which it deploys its investment strategy in that the focus on minorities it's reflected on how it invests. Its approaches, its ways in which it picks its investees, or it's just a question of, listen, man, we are black, because we have that question, because we're black, therefore, we should get it to invest in more black people. But
that's a common.
Yeah, and when we put it in a machine, in an Excel sheet or in a software, the numbers are still the same. So what's the difference?
That's very common. I will say that on two fronts. You have a lot of companies. It is the trend now to be, especially with all the stuff going on in the news about intolerance and just people not learning how to get along with one another. It's very common right now for a lot of companies, especially big corporates, to pay lip service to wanting to do things that help them get more pipelines into underrepresented folks in a lot of different areas. So that's very common. But to your point, the proof is in the pudding. It's great for you to say that, and it's great for you to have a public PR post that says, we are, a great company and this is why. And it's different than actually changing any of your practices that help that. And I would think one of the things that I'm super proud of with the Backstage crew is little things like, we talk a lot about, it's not that, and this is controversial too, but I have my own opinions. It's not that traditionally that people in a all white males are evil or all white male investors are ignoring folks. Sometimes they do not know people that are in underrepresented. They don't know underrepresented folks. They don't know where they would find them, but they also don't understand problems that an underrepresented founder might try to solve through launching an app. So when you talk about things like, I always call the Red Bull at 3 a.m. So I'm a Techstars person, have been for umpteen years, and I run hackathons all over the country. And so I always find, for lack of a better term, facts. I always find kids, and I say kids, but it's true. They come to the hackathon and they create Red Bull at 3 a.m. I have an app that no matter where you are, you wake up and you can press a button and you can get Red Bull at 3 a.m. It's a frivolous problem. It doesn't really solve anything. It doesn't have any ability to scale. But if they're only able to invest in those types of ideas because they're running out of ideas, as people say, that's not true, but that's what people say. It's partially because they aren't sourcing, they don't have access to folks who are thinking of things from different levels. People who are looking at transportation, people who are trying to catch a bus, people who are trying to save money but don't know how, and need different, like all these kind of things are solutions that can be applied to the masses and can make VCs money. So it's not charity, it's a whole mass of people who have the ability to be consumers and to give you a return on your investment, but most people do not know that. because they don't have access to it. They just don't have interaction points in there. So it's one of those things, it's a common thing. There are a lot of companies that will pay lip service to wanting to be diverse and inclusive and wanting to be better. But some of them don't know how to be better, and some of them aren't willing to change any of their practices on recruiting, on education, things like that will help it. And we always say too, it's really that if you're a minority and you have only a certain subset of your group who understand what a cap table is and who understand what a term sheet are and can ask questions or have ever even heard of anybody being an entrepreneur or raising funds or things like that, your conversations in your family are going to be different. If you are anywhere in the entrepreneurial space, you know that connections are everything. You know that the ability to call your uncle or to call somebody who's in a space and ask them to make an intro for you or get you help on X, Y, and Z is going to be very, very key on whether you think this is even possible. And so that is one of the things that Backstage has been very, very intentional on, is just our whole method for recruiting and educating folks and understanding the population that we're working with is a population that does not have VCs in their family traditionally, numerically, statistically. They do not have founders who have, at a large scale seen a lot of success, just because there aren't a lot of underrepresented founders. It's just it's a numbers thing. So if you know that, then you know you have to approach it differently when you're thinking about what the application process is going to look like. Do people understand what it means to pitch? Do people understand what you mean when you say product market fit? Do they even know that's something they need to look up? And so those kind of things, being intentional about understanding that that's your audience and how to solve for that, helps change the ecosystem and then does have an actual tangible output on your numbers and how things will go further. Hope that helps a little bit.
So really, there are two pieces there. One is that the return profile is the same regardless of minority or I know the term is ethnicity, I think. That the return profiles are the same, so that it's not that it's like a lesser or a give me or anything. It's the same financial outcome, and there's just a different net, I guess, it's being cast.
Yeah, and it is definitely a different net, and I think it's just different ways when you think about it. We talk a lot about because we are focused on female founders. This is something that a lot of accelerators and stuff don't think about. Is a lot of females do not apply to accelerators and things like that because they don't have childcare. They don't, things like that. So if you're focused on making sure that there are more women can be a part of an accelerator or a pitch competition or this, that, and the other, then if you make solutions for things like that, you'll have a higher yield of women who think that this is possible and who think that, yeah, that might be a good one for me to join because at least I know that they know I need a nursing room. I've never had children, so I've never had to nurse, but I know that this is a problem for women who have had children. I've been in the tech space my whole life, and I've been the only woman in most of the tech spaces that I've existed in my entire career. And I can tell you that it has not been always fun, and it has not always been where you're trying to explain to people why that's offensive and why, but you don't want people to be on pins and needles either, but you do want them to at least make an effort to try to make it so that it makes sense that you can be a female in a high-tech position, and maybe you do need to nurse. Maybe you do need, like in my case, I adopted my nieces, and I need to make it home before 8 o'clock every night. Sorry, like stuff like that. But I'm a single parent. And if I'm getting blockages, then I'm not going to participate in a lot of these tech things because I don't have any solutions. So the more that you do that, you do have a higher yield because you're just making solutions for some of those pieces.
Last question. I'm going to ask it. Monica,
Yes.
what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think for the longest time, I think I just really wanted to make sure that the air that I breathed was worth it. Like that I had a purpose, that I wasn't just sitting here. Like that I had a lot of advantages given to me, a lot, and I had a lot of people who invested into me time, energy, and just goodwill, if you will. And so I really just wanted to always feel like they got dividends from their time with me. So I think it's really low key, it's not anything big. It's really just, I want them to feel like that they can see the things that I've been able to do and that it was worth it, that they invested into me. And if I can do that, then I'm happy.
Thank you very much for sharing with us.
Thank you guys.
All right.
Okay, if you've been at Startup Grind before, you know that we always get the speaker a gift. So we have a gift for you. So, it's always like a personalized gift sort of thing. So I noticed you're kind of active on Twitter.
Okay.
So I went and scrolled through your Twitter. I actually ran this little tool that told me like all your popular hashtags. And we got your popular hashtags. I put them on a Rubik's Cube. And I'll read them off to you guys. So we have Women in Tech, Backstage Accelerator, Detroit Hustles Harder, Female Founders, which you've said like 10 times tonight already, Renaissance City, and was that 6? There's 6 sides.
Thank you so much.